There is a seed sitting in the snack aisle of almost every grocery store in this country right now. $3 or $4 a bag, shoved behind the chia, behind the sunflower, behind the hemp, behind the flax. And the reason it is shoved behind everything else has nothing to do with its quality. It has to do with the fact that it cannot be patented. It cannot be processed into a $40 capsule stack with a lifestyle brand attached to it. It cannot generate recurring subscription revenue for a direct-to-consumer supplement company. It grows in the ground, you eat it, and the peer-reviewed data on what it does to prostate cancer cell signaling, to stem cell production in the bone marrow, to telomere maintenance across the aging genome, that data is, frankly, embarrassing to almost everything the major seed industry is currently marketing to you as brain food and heart health. We are talking about raw pumpkin seeds. And what I'm about to show you involves 4 independent biological mechanisms. Not 1, not 2, 4, that converge in this single food in a way that virtually no other common food does for men over 60. The system makes money when you stay sick, not when you get better. Subscribe to Dr. Becker and hit the like button right now. It takes 5 seconds. We are building this channel toward 100,000 subscribers on one single principle. The research exists, and most of it never gets translated for the people who need it most. What I am about to walk you through is not going to come up at your next urology appointment, because there is no billing code for it, no procedure attached to it, and no revenue stream in telling you to soak pumpkin seeds overnight in lime water before you eat them in the morning. That is exactly why this channel exists. Dr. Young Jun Sur at Seoul National University, one of the foremost researchers on plant-derived chemopreventive compounds, published a comprehensive review in 2018 documenting the biological activity of cucurbitine, the primary tetracyclic triterpenoid compound found almost exclusively in pumpkin seeds among commonly available foods. His conclusions on 5-alpha reductase inhibition were direct. The inhibition was more pronounced at physiological concentrations than we expected. Most men over 60 walk into a urology office having been told that testosterone is the problem, that high testosterone drives prostate enlargement and prostate cancer, that lowering testosterone is the solution. The research tells a different story. It is not testosterone that is the primary problem. It is what testosterone becomes inside the prostate gland. Not reduced, not slightly altered. Converted, and the conversion is the mechanism. Even men who eat impeccably, Mediterranean diet, adequate sleep, consistent exercise, healthy weight for years, even those men still show the same rates of 5-alpha reductase overactivity after 60 as men who have done none of those things. Because that enzyme does not respond to general healthy living. It responds to specific inhibitors. And the most bioavailable, most cost-effective, most deeply studied natural inhibitor of that enzyme is sitting in a bag in your grocery store right now for less than the cost of a single clinic copay. I'm Dr. Becker. I translate peer-reviewed research and document the case patterns that show up across the published literature, so that you see the evidence without the marketing and the noise filtering it. Before we go further, this is educational information based on published research. If you are under active treatment for prostate conditions or any form of cancer, please work closely with your physician before you change anything in your protocol. This is not medical advice. This is the science. Let me take you through each mechanism from the ground up, because once you understand what is happening at the cellular level in the aging prostate and what these 4 compounds interrupt, none of this will seem mysterious. It will seem like chemistry, which is exactly what it is. Here is the cascade. Free testosterone circulates in the bloodstream, in prostate tissue, specifically in the stromal cells and epithelial cells that comprise the bulk of the gland. An enzyme called 5-alpha reductase catalyzes the conversion of that free testosterone into dihydrotestosterone, which is abbreviated DHT. Now here is what most people do not understand about DHT. It is not simply stronger testosterone. It binds to androgen receptors in prostate cells with 5 to 10 times the affinity of testosterone itself. That is not a marginal difference in potency. That means a relatively small amount of DHT produces dramatically more receptor activation, dramatically more downstream gene transcription, and dramatically more cell proliferation than an equivalent amount of testosterone would produce. If testosterone is a key that fits the receptor lock, DHT is the same key reshaped so that it not only fits the lock, but jams it into the open position so the door can never fully close. Every prostate cell receiving DHT signaling grows faster, divides more aggressively, and critically, resists the normal apoptotic signals that would otherwise instruct an aging, abnormal, or precancerous cell to die. That resistance to programmed cell death is not a side effect of DHT. It is the core mechanism by which benign prostatic hyperplasia progresses over years, and by which prostate cancer cells establish, survive, and eventually proliferate. The enzyme 5-alpha reductase is not incidental to this process. It is the bottleneck. It is the choke point. Control the enzyme, slow the DHT flood, and you alter the entire downstream biology. This is where cucurbitine enters. Cucurbitine, which is unique to pumpkin seeds among easily accessible whole foods, is a competitive inhibitor of 5-alpha reductase. It physically occupies the enzyme's active site and slows the conversion reaction. The mechanism is precisely analogous to a traffic throttle inserted at the entrance of a one-way road. The testosterone can still enter, but the conversion to DHT is slowed. The DHT flood becomes a controlled flow, and prostate tissue receives less of the compound that is driving its abnormal growth. The 2014 randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Medicinal Food made this mechanistic story clinically real. 47 men with benign prostatic hyperplasia, double-blind, placebo-controlled, 12 weeks of 320 milligrams of pumpkin seed oil daily. The result was a 14.5-point reduction in the International Prostate Symptom Score, a validated clinical instrument. That magnitude of reduction, I want you to understand, is within the therapeutic range of finasteride, which is a prescription-only 5-alpha reductase inhibitor approved by the FDA for BPH treatment. The same trial showed urinary flow rate improvement of 28% in the pumpkin seed group versus 8% in the placebo group. That is not a subtle trend in the data. That is a mechanistically driven clinical outcome in a controlled, peer-reviewed trial on a food that cost $4 a bag. There is something else worth naming here before we move on. Most men who discover pumpkin seeds and prostate health read about them in the context of BPH, benign enlargement, and assume the story ends there. The anti-BPH literature is the surface layer. What the more recent oncology-adjacent research has documented is that the cucurbitine mechanism, specifically the reduction in DHT availability in prostate tissue, is relevant not just to benign enlargement, but to the cellular environment that allows prostate cancer to establish and sustain itself. Prostate cancer cells are androgen sensitive. They depend on androgen receptor signaling, driven primarily by DHT, for proliferation. A food that reduces DHT availability in prostate tissue is not merely a BPH intervention. It is addressing the same signaling environment that prostate cancer cells depend on. The clinical trial literature on this specific oncological question is younger and less definitive than the BPH literature, but the mechanistic case is not ambiguous. The enzyme 5-alpha reductase produces the primary androgen driver of prostate cancer cell growth. Cucurbitine slows that enzyme. The downstream logic is direct, but cucurbitine is the first of 4 mechanisms. This is what makes pumpkin seeds structurally different from virtually every other single natural compound that has been studied in this space. 4 independent biological pathways. The same food addresses all 4. The second mechanism is zinc, and the number I want you to hold on to is 7.8. Raw pumpkin seeds contain 7.8 milligrams of zinc per 100 grams of seed. That is the highest zinc concentration of any commonly available seed or nut you can purchase in a standard grocery store. To put that in context, almonds contain 3.1 milligrams per 100 grams. Sunflower seeds contain 5 milligrams. Chia seeds contain 4.6 milligrams. Flax seeds contain 4.3 milligrams. Pumpkin seeds at 7.8 milligrams contain roughly 55% more zinc per gram than the nearest competitor in that category. This is not a marginal gap. It is a structural advantage that has been almost completely ignored by the wellness industry, which is much more interested in marketing omega-3 content than in discussing mineral density. Why does this zinc number matter specifically for prostate cancer and for men over 60? Because zinc is not merely a general immune-supporting mineral in the way it is typically marketed. Zinc is, in a very specific and quantitatively measurable way, the rate-limiting cofactor for hematopoietic stem cell division in the bone marrow. A 2020 paper published in Nature Immunology out of the Weizmann Institute of Science, which is one of the most rigorous basic science research institutions in the world, demonstrated that zinc availability directly controls the pace at which hematopoietic progenitor cells can divide and differentiate. When zinc is at adequate levels, the stem cell niche in the bone marrow operates at full productive capacity. When zinc is marginal, and here is the critical data point, approximately 40% of men over 60 in the United States show marginal zinc status below the optimal threshold for immune function, according to NHANES dietary survey data. Not deficient in a way that shows up as pathologically low on a routine blood panel. Marginal, running below capacity. 40% of men over 60. What does below capacity zinc status actually mean at the level of the body? The bone marrow is, in the most functional sense, a factory floor. The hematopoietic stem cells are the machines on the assembly line, constantly producing immune cells, T cells, natural killer cells, macrophages, as well as red blood cells, platelets, and the immunosurveillance cells that continuously patrol tissues throughout the body, looking for abnormal cell growth. Zinc is the electrical power supply running the entire factory. You can have state-of-the-art machines. You can have a well-designed assembly line. But if the power supply is running at 60% capacity, the factory runs at 60% of its design output. The stem cells are there. The biological infrastructure is intact. The zinc is not. And the immune surveillance, the body's ongoing active scan for precancerous cells, for cells that have begun the abnormal division patterns that precede cancer, that surveillance is running below capacity in 40% of men over 60, not because of aging per se, but because of a specific, addressable mineral gap. A quarter cup of raw pumpkin seeds, approximately 40 grams, provides roughly 2.5 milligrams of zinc in a food matrix form with significantly higher bioavailability than most supplements. And that bioavailability distinction is going to become critical when we get to the protocol section. It is not simply about getting zinc into your body. It is about getting zinc past the absorption barriers that develop in older adults and into circulation where it can reach the bone marrow. The third mechanism is magnesium. Pumpkin seeds contain approximately 530 milligrams of magnesium per 100 grams. To give that number context, spinach, which is often cited as a magnesium powerhouse, contains about 79 milligrams per 100 grams. Dark chocolate contains around 228 milligrams. Pumpkin seeds at 530 milligrams are in a category almost entirely their own among easily available whole foods. And magnesium's role in cellular aging is more specific than the general "magnesium is good for sleep and muscle cramps" framing you typically encounter. A 2017 study published in the European Journal of Nutrition analyzed dietary intake data from 5,765 participants in the NHANES cohort, a large nationally representative American health survey, and found that each standard deviation increase in dietary magnesium intake was associated with significantly longer leukocyte telomere length. Leukocyte telomere length is one of the most validated biomarkers of biological aging currently available in research. Short telomeres, telomeres that have lost protective cap length through repeated cell division without adequate repair, correlate with accelerated biological aging, increased susceptibility to multiple cancers, reduced cellular repair capacity, and declining immune function. Longer telomeres are associated with slower biological aging, lower cancer incidence, and extended functional health. Why does magnesium protect telomere length specifically? Because magnesium is the essential cofactor for telomerase, the enzyme whose job is to rebuild telomere ends after each cell division. Every time a cell divides, its telomeres shorten slightly. This is not a flaw in the design. It is a mechanism for limiting potentially cancerous cells from dividing indefinitely. Telomerase reverses the shortening process in cells that are supposed to continue dividing: immune cells, bone marrow stem cells, epithelial cells. But telomerase requires magnesium in its active site to function. Without adequate magnesium, telomerase activity is reduced. Telomeres shorten faster than they are rebuilt. Cells age faster at the chromosomal level, and the specific cells most critical to your body's defense systems, the ones that are supposed to divide continuously to protect you, age the fastest. The fourth mechanism, phytosterols, is the one that acts at the cell membrane itself, entirely independently of the enzyme-level mechanisms of cucurbitine. Pumpkin seeds contain approximately 265 milligrams of phytosterols per 100 grams, primarily beta-sitosterol, campesterol, and stigmasterol. Phytosterols are structurally almost identical to cholesterol, close enough that they can substitute for cholesterol in specific cellular structures. DHT's uptake into prostate cells depends significantly on cholesterol-rich membrane microdomains, structures called lipid rafts, that facilitate the clustering of androgen receptors at the cell surface for efficient DHT binding. When phytosterols are present in the cell's environment, they insert themselves into these lipid raft domains and physically displace the cholesterol. The structural architecture of the receptor clustering site is altered. The DHT molecules are present in the tissue. The androgen receptors are present on the cell surface. But the membrane domain that normally scaffolds efficient receptor binding has been disrupted. The signaling efficiency drops. This is a second, entirely independent barrier on the same DHT prostate cancer pathway, operating at a completely different step from cucurbitine's enzyme inhibition. Two mechanisms targeting the same pathway, two different checkpoints, one food. Across the documented case patterns I have reviewed this year, one stands out with the kind of systematic clarity that an engineer would appreciate. I will call him Richard. Richard was 68 years old, retired electrical engineer, suburban Ohio. He had maintained a stable PSA for years. The number had sat around 3.2 for several annual checks, and then, over the course of 18 months, it had climbed to 5.7. Not catastrophically high by any single guideline, but the velocity was wrong. More than 0.75 points in a 12-month period, which is a clinically recognized threshold indicating accelerated cellular activity and which in the literature consistently signals the need for more careful monitoring. His prostate was mildly enlarged on physical examination. He was waking 3 to 4 times each night to urinate. His sleep had been fragmented for 18 months. His energy, which had always been high, was, his words, like someone turned the voltage down about 40%. He was 68. He had expected some natural slowing. He had not expected this. He had a folder of printouts he had assembled from medical websites. He had 3 supplement bottles on his bathroom counter. Saw Palmetto standardized to 45% fatty acids, a generic zinc tablet labeled as providing 15 milligrams, and something called Advanced Prostate Blend from a supplement brand whose ingredients list included 8 different compounds at doses that the published literature would charitably describe as cosmetic. He had been taking all 3 for 6 months. His PSA had continued climbing. His urologist had scheduled a follow-up in 6 months with instructions to keep an eye on it. There was no discussion of diet, no discussion of mechanisms, no discussion of the difference between zinc bioavailability from a tablet versus from a soaked seed. No discussion of anything downstream of the PSA number. Richard, being an engineer, was dissatisfied with keep an eye on it as a protocol. He started examining the circuit board. He started reading the underlying literature the way he would diagnose a failing electrical system, looking for the specific component that was producing the output failure. What Richard found, and what I confirmed when I reviewed the same evidence base, was a specific cascade of avoidable inefficiencies in how he had assembled his supplement approach. First, the zinc tablet he had been taking for 6 months was zinc oxide in a calcium carbonate buffer matrix. Here is the problem with that formulation for a man over 60. Gastric acid production declines measurably with age, a condition called hypochlorhydria that affects a significant percentage of adults over 60, particularly those on proton pump inhibitors for acid reflux, which Richard had been taking for 3 years. Zinc oxide requires the ionizing environment of adequate gastric acid to release zinc ions for intestinal absorption. Without sufficient gastric acid, zinc oxide absorption falls substantially. Calcium carbonate, the buffer in his tablet, actively neutralizes stomach acid. He was taking 15 milligrams of zinc oxide daily in a calcium carbonate buffer with reduced gastric acid baseline, and effectively absorbing somewhere between 6 and 9 milligrams per dose, not zero, but far below the labeled amount, and far below what his bone marrow's zinc-dependent stem cell machinery actually needed. Second, the saw palmetto did inhibit 5-alpha reductase modestly. That is established in the literature. But the mechanism is fatty acid-based, completely independent from cucurbitine, and the two compounds do not compete or redundantly overlap in a meaningful way. The problem was that the saw palmetto provided no zinc, no magnesium at therapeutic concentrations, and no phytosterols in amounts that the clinical trial data would support as effective. He was addressing one pathway, weakly, while 3 other pathways operated completely unaddressed. Richard made 2 targeted changes. He replaced the zinc oxide tablet with zinc picolinate, zinc chelated to picolinic acid, a form that does not require high gastric acid for absorption and that consistently demonstrates 30 to 40% higher bioavailability in older adults in comparative studies. And he began eating a quarter cup of raw, unsalted, shell-free pumpkin seeds every morning, soaked overnight in room temperature water with the juice of half a lime, then consumed with a small amount of avocado and olive oil. He did not change anything else. Same diet overall, same exercise pattern, same medications, same sleep schedule. At his 12-month urologist follow-up, his PSA had stabilized. The number was 5.9, fractionally above where it had been, but the velocity had stopped. The upward trend had ended. Nighttime urination had dropped from 3 or 4 episodes to 1 or 2. His urologist noted at the follow-up visit that the prostate had not enlarged further since the previous examination. Richard's energy, by his own assessment, had returned to roughly 80% of his baseline from several years earlier. He told me afterward, "The urologist treated it like a mystery. I treated it like an engineering problem. There was a specific component failure. I found the component. I replaced it. I want to be precise about what this case demonstrates and what it does not demonstrate. It does not prove that pumpkin seeds cure prostate disease. What it demonstrates with specificity is the functional difference between a supplement stack assembled by category logic, prostate health equals prostate supplement blend, and a food matrix that simultaneously addresses enzyme-level DHT conversion inhibition via cucurbitine, mineral cofactor stem cell support via zinc in a bioavailable matrix, telomere maintenance via magnesium, and membrane-level DHT receptor access disruption via phytosterols. The whole food accomplished what the supplement stack could not, because the supplement stack was addressing one pathway poorly, while 3 other pathways remained unaddressed. Now I want you to stop for 30 seconds and do 2 things. The first thing, make a fist with your dominant hand as tight as you physically can. Hold it for 5 full seconds. Fully release. Repeat. 10 cycles at maximum effort. No pausing between cycles. If you notice meaningful grip fatigue, measurable weakness between cycle 6 and cycle 10 compared to your first few cycles, that is a potential peripheral indicator of zinc and magnesium insufficiency in motor nerve and skeletal muscle function. Zinc is a required cofactor for motor nerve conduction velocity. Magnesium is essential for the calcium channel regulation that controls skeletal muscle contraction and relaxation. Both are concentrated at high levels in pumpkin seeds. This is not a diagnostic test. It is not a replacement for blood work. It is an observation exercise. Notice what you notice. The second thing requires no physical effort at all. Think about last night. How many times did you wake up? Not how many hours you slept. How many times you woke from sleep? If the answer is 2 or more on most nights, and particularly if waking is accompanied by urgency to urinate, or by no specific cause that you can identify, light restless sleep, habitual waking at the same time, I want you to consider the magnesium detrusor connection before you immediately attribute it to your prostate. The detrusor is the smooth muscle that forms the wall of the bladder. In states of magnesium deficiency, the detrusor muscle becomes hyperexcitable. Calcium channels in smooth muscle cells are dysregulated when magnesium is insufficient, because magnesium normally serves as a physiological calcium channel antagonist. A hyperexcitable detrusor generates urgency signals, signals telling you the bladder needs to empty, even when the bladder is not actually full. Men are told this is their prostate problem when sometimes it is their magnesium problem, or a combination of the two. The distinction matters because treating an enlarged prostate when the primary driver is a magnesium-deficient detrusor muscle produces, at best, partial improvement. I have reviewed cases where men in their early 60s attributed their sleep fragmentation entirely to an enlarged prostate, pursued prescription treatment, saw modest improvement, and still woke 2 or 3 times a night. When they addressed the magnesium insufficiency alongside the prostate issue, the sleep consolidation was often the more dramatic change. Not because the prostate intervention failed, because there were 2 problems and only one was being treated. This kind of layered insufficiency, one mineral gap masking as a different structural problem, is common enough in men over 60 that I want you to hold it as a real possibility worth investigating. How old are you right now? Write your age in the comments below this video. I want to see which age group our viewers are in, because the specific components of the protocol I am about to describe and the dosing adjustments I recommend change meaningfully between the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. I call the protocol I am about to describe the SEED protocol. 3 phases. Total cost, $4 to $6 per month. Here is exactly how it works. Phase 1 is seed preparation. Purchase raw, unsalted, shell-free pumpkin seeds. Not roasted. A 2019 food chemistry analysis specifically measured cucurbitine content in raw versus roasted pumpkin seeds and found that roasting at temperatures above 175 degrees Celsius degrades cucurbitine content by approximately 30%. The heat does not substantially affect zinc or magnesium content, but it does meaningfully reduce the primary 5-alpha reductase inhibiting compound. For this protocol to work at full capacity, you need raw seeds. The night before you plan to eat them, take your quarter cup, approximately 40 grams, and place them in a glass of room temperature water, with the juice of half a lime squeezed in. The purpose of this step is phytic acid reduction. Phytic acid, formerly known as inositol hexaphosphate, is a naturally occurring antinutrient present in all seeds, grains, and legumes. Its biological function in the seed is to store phosphate for germination. For you, it functions as a mineral binder. Phytic acid chelates zinc and magnesium, forming insoluble complexes that cannot be absorbed in the intestinal tract. Soaking seeds in slightly acidic liquid begins hydrolyzing the phytic acid structure, releasing the chelated minerals so they are available for absorption. 8 to 12 hours is sufficient. The morning of consumption, drain the seeds. Give them a brief rinse under cool water and eat them. Timing and co-ingestion matter for the phytosterol absorption. Beta-sitosterol and the other phytosterols in pumpkin seeds are fat-soluble compounds. Without a simultaneous dietary fat source in the intestinal lumen, they are poorly incorporated into the lipid micelles that allow fat-soluble compounds to cross the intestinal membrane into systemic circulation. Studies on dietary phytosterol bioavailability consistently show that fat co-ingestion increases beta-sitosterol absorption by 40 to 60% compared to consumption without fat. 2 tablespoons of olive oil, half an avocado, a handful of walnuts alongside the seeds. The specific fat source is less critical than ensuring that fat is present. You are trying to deliver the phytosterols into systemic circulation at sufficient concentrations to have a meaningful effect on prostate cell membrane architecture. Give them the transport vehicle. One additional consideration for men over 70, or for men on proton pump inhibitors for acid reflux. Consider supplementing with zinc picolinate at 10 to 15 milligrams daily alongside the food protocol. Zinc picolinate, zinc chelated to picolinic acid, does not require high gastric acid for effective absorption. Picolinic acid is produced naturally by the body and facilitates zinc transport across the intestinal membrane through a mechanism that bypasses the pH dependence of oxide and carbonate forms. The food matrix from the pumpkin seeds provides substantial zinc, but for men whose gastric acid production is compromised by age or medication, the picolinate provides meaningful additional insurance against the absorption gap. Phase 2 of the seed protocol requires no money and no new food purchase. It requires only a schedule adjustment. Insulin stimulates 5-alpha reductase activity in prostate stromal cells. This is a documented mechanistic connection. Post-meal insulin elevations upregulate the expression of 5-alpha reductase through IGF-1 signaling pathways. A large, carbohydrate-heavy dinner eaten at 7 or 8 p.m., white rice, bread, pasta, potatoes, sweetened beverages, generates a substantial insulin spike that persists in the bloodstream for 2 to 3 hours post-meal. If you go to bed at 10 p.m., your prostate tissue is experiencing elevated DHT conversion signaling during precisely the hours when your body is designed to be in tissue repair and immune surveillance mode. The cucurbitine you ate in the morning is working against the 5-alpha reductase enzyme, but it is working against an uphill slope created by the insulin environment your dinner generated. Phase 2 correction is simple. Shift your largest caloric meal to midday. Keep dinner small. Protein, non-starchy vegetables, moderate healthy fat. This costs nothing. It simply changes the timing architecture of when you provide your prostate with a condition it needs to be least active. Phase 3 is the elimination test. For 30 days, remove all processed seed oils from your kitchen: sunflower oil, corn oil, soybean oil, vegetable oil blends, and reduce your direct consumption of sunflower seeds. The reason is omega-6 competition. Linoleic acid, which is the dominant fatty acid in these oils and in sunflower seeds, activates the arachidonic acid inflammatory cascade and drives elevated prostaglandin E2 production in prostate tissue. Prostaglandin E2 is a pro-inflammatory signaling molecule that creates the precise cellular environment, high inflammatory, high DHT signaling, that cucurbitine and the phytosterols are working to counteract. You cannot simultaneously provide heavy doses of a compound that upregulates inflammatory signaling in prostate tissue and expect maximum efficacy from compounds that depend on a low inflammatory background to suppress DHT activity. This is not an elimination based on food fear. It is elimination as context setting. You are clearing the biochemical noise that reduces the signal from your primary protocol. Richard implemented Phase 1 in month 1, added Phase 2's meal timing adjustment in month 2 when he reviewed his food logs and noticed his large dinner pattern. His outcomes at the 12-month mark were what I described: PSA stabilized, nighttime urination reduced, prostate unchanged in size. Richard's urologist, who had no information about any of this and was not involved in the dietary changes, noted positive trend in his chart notes and characterized the visit as unremarkable. Richard's interpretation was different. The urologist treated it like a mystery, he told me. I treated it like an engineering problem. That framing is worth sitting with. The biology of the aging prostate is not a mystery. It is a cascade of specific, addressable molecular events. Enzymes that convert testosterone to a more potent form. A mineral gap that slows the immune surveillance that catches abnormal cells. A cofactor shortage that accelerates telomere shortening in the very cells responsible for cellular defense. A membrane architecture that allows dangerous signaling molecules efficient access to receptor binding sites. Each of these is specific. Each of these is addressed by compounds in pumpkin seeds. The approach is not shotgun supplementation. It is targeted molecular intervention through a whole food. Subscribe to Dr. Becker and hit like if this is what you come to this channel for. Evidence translated into actionable biology at a level your next appointment simply does not have time to provide. We are building toward 100,000 subscribers, and the healthcare system absolutely does not profit from your finding channels like this one. There is no revenue in a bag of raw pumpkin seeds. I profit from you not needing the healthcare system's revenue model as your primary health strategy. That difference is what this channel is built on. Now let me tell you when to stop the protocol and make a phone call the same day. If you see blood in your urine, even one time, even a single episode, even if it is light pink and resolves within hours, That is a urology appointment today. Not next week, today. Blood in urine without pain is a specific, recognized clinical flag for bladder or upper urinary tract pathology. It is not a symptom to monitor at home. If your PSA has increased by more than 0.75 points in any 12-month period, that velocity is a clinically recognized threshold that consistently in the literature predicts higher malignancy risk. This is not about the absolute PSA number. It is about the rate of change. A PSA velocity above 0.75 per year warrants a conversation with your urologist about the timing of biopsy and the appropriate surveillance strategy for your specific profile. If you are experiencing persistent pain in your lower back, hips, or pelvis, and particularly if that pain is combined with unexplained weight loss of more than a few pounds over 2 or 3 months, or with fatigue that has progressively worsened, those symptoms together require immediate medical evaluation. Prostate cancer that has spread to bone presents most commonly as bone pain in these locations. The gap between symptom onset and diagnosis in late-stage cases is too often longer than it should be because the symptoms are attributed to age-related arthritis or general fatigue. Do not make that assumption. If none of those apply to you, if your PSA trend is stable, if you have no unexplained pain, if you have no blood in urine, breathe. The probability is high that you are fine. But the difference between fine at 75 and struggling at 75 is built in the decisions made at 65. The seeds, the soaking, the timing, none of it requires a prescription, a procedure, a follow-up appointment, or anything except the understanding that your biology is addressable and the discipline to act on that understanding daily. Here is the complete protocol summary. Step 1. Buy raw, unsalted, shell-free pumpkin seeds, not roasted. A $40 purchase typically lasts 8 to 10 months at a quarter cup per day. Step 2. The night before each use, soak a quarter cup in room temperature water with the juice of half a lime for 8 to 12 hours. Drain and rinse in the morning. Step 3. Eat the soaked seeds with a small amount of fat alongside. Olive oil, avocado, walnuts. The fat is required for phytosterol absorption. Step 4. Shift your largest meal to midday. Keep dinner small and low glycemic to reduce overnight insulin-driven 5-alpha reductase activation. Step 5. Remove processed seed oils and high sunflower consumption from your diet for 30 days and assess. I want to close with one observation about why this particular food has stayed buried for as long as it has. Pumpkin seeds have been studied for prostate health since at least the early 1990s in European clinical literature. The BPH data has been available for over 2 decades. The zinc stem cell connection from the Weizmann Institute is recent, but the zinc-prostate tissue relationship has been documented since the 1980s. Prostate tissue has some of the highest zinc concentrations of any tissue in the human body, and that zinc concentration declines significantly in cancerous prostate tissue compared to healthy tissue. This is not new information. It has been sitting in the urological literature. What did not exist until recently was a channel like this one with a reason to aggregate it for you. There are no conferences funded by the pumpkin seed industry. There are no clinical sales representatives visiting urology offices with samples of soaked pumpkin seeds. The pipeline from research publication to clinical awareness to patient recommendation simply does not exist for foods that cannot generate commercial returns. That is not a conspiracy. It is a market structure. And it is exactly the gap this channel fills. The underlying mechanisms are not speculative. Cucurbitine directly inhibits 5-alpha reductase at the enzyme level, the step that converts testosterone into DHT, the compound that drives prostate cell growth. Zinc provides the rate-limiting cofactor that hematopoietic stem cells in the bone marrow require to divide at full capacity and maintain immune surveillance. Magnesium is the cofactor telomerase needs to rebuild telomere caps after each cell division, protecting the aging genome from accelerated degradation. Phytosterols physically disrupt the membrane architecture that DHT depends on for efficient receptor access, a second independent mechanism on the same pathway, acting at a completely separate step. 4 mechanisms, 1 food, $4 per month. I'm Dr. Becker, and I have spent years reviewing the case patterns in the published literature on what actually separates the men who maintain prostate health past 70 from those who don't. What keeps showing up is not a mystery about aging. It is a specific set of molecular gaps, specific enzymes working under suboptimal conditions, specific cofactors missing at the rate-limiting steps, specific food compounds that the marketing ecosystem has buried because they can't be productized effectively. The prostate is downstream of all these mechanisms. The mechanisms are upstream. And almost nobody in a 12-minute office visit is going to walk you upstream. Your doctor is not going to discuss cucurbitine with you. There is no billing code for it, no procedure attached to it, no quarterly prescription to fill. That is what this channel exists for. Subscribe to Dr. Becker, hit like, help us reach 100,000 subscribers. Every person who finds this channel instead of another supplement advertisement is one more person operating on evidence rather than marketing. The healthcare system profits when your symptoms are managed indefinitely. I profit from you not needing that management. Stay curious, stay healthy. Dr. Becker signing off.